Albert Grows Up by Nate Gepford. Albert Spencer is a 12-year-old boy in the city of Big Rock, Illinois. Albert is the kind of child that can't wait to grow up and be an adult. He can't wait to travel the world and not even have to ask his parents for permission or even worry about a bedtime. He often daydreams in class about what it would be like to be a grown-up. He imagines starting conversations by a water cooler at an office with another guy that he eventually befriends. Albert even goes so far as to dress up in a nice suit and tie to school every day, even though he gets made fun of sometimes by other students. But all the other teachers love Albert for his moxie and wish all students were as respectful as Albert. During recess, Albert does not play on the playground. He does not play soccer, kickball, basketball, hopscotch, tetherball, or anything that has to do with running, jumping, or yelling, "Ready or not, here I come." No, Albert is too busy helping teachers grade homework or setting up class activities. Albert is always told by his teacher, Mr. Parker, that he has a good work ethic and that a good attitude will get him far in life. But even though Albert gets reassured by his teachers that what he is doing is a good thing, he still feels like there is something missing from his life. Until one day, a new student came into Albert's classroom and introduced himself to everyone. "My name's Jonathan Baker, I like video games, and I have the most amazing dad in the world." There was an empty seat next to Albert in front of the classroom, and Jonathan sat down with his Batman-themed backpack and pulls out a plastic bag full of pencils. Today was also the day of the big geography quiz everyone, especially Albert, had been studying for. Mr. Parker tells Jonathan that because he is new and unprepared for the quiz that he does not have to take it today. However, Jonathan is a brave kid who is not likely to doubt himself, and he takes the quiz and immediately starts filling in the blank map. Later that day, Albert is helping Mr. Parker grade the quizzes, like he does every time the students take a quiz. And Albert notices that Jonathan got every answer correct. Albert was shocked because now there are two kids with A+ in the classroom, him and Jonathan. Mr. Parker, also impressed with Jonathan's test score, tells Albert to go join the rest of the class for recess, that he needs to go talk about Jonathan's test score with the other teachers. While near the soccer fields, Albert is watching all the other kids playing and having fun. Just then, Jonathan comes up to Albert and asks if he would like to play soccer. Not having played before, Albert just says, "No thanks, I'll just watch." Later after school, Albert is walking home and hears footsteps coming from behind. It was Jonathan, and Jonathan wanted Albert to join him at his home for video games, and "I won't take no for an answer," he says. So Jonathan shows Albert his home, which is right across the street from Albert's. They go to the living room in front of a big TV, and Albert, not having played video games in years, is not very good at first, but eventually starts getting the hang of it. Eventually, Jonathan's dad comes to join them. Albert had no idea grown-ups played video games. Albert also didn't realize how much fun he could have with an adult. After a while, Albert sees his own dad pull into the driveways of his home and decides that it has gotten late and not to go home before dinner is ready. Albert, Jonathan, and his dad all say their goodbyes, and later that night, Albert spent the first half of dinner just staring at his food and started thinking. Albert's parents eventually asked him why he hasn't touched any of his lasagna, and Albert begins talking about how the day was his favorite day at school, and continues with how happy he was that he made 2 new friends, and that one of them was a grown-up. His parents were very curious as to what made these 2 new friends so special, because Albert, in all 12 of his years, never once mentioned another student from school, or friend for that matter. When Albert said that it was Jonathan Baker and his dad that he became friends with, his parents knew exactly who he was talking about. Albert began explaining why Jonathan's dad was so special. It was because Jonathan's dad had autism. They told Albert that having autism does not mean that a person is sick, but rather that a person sees the world differently and even thinks differently. Albert thought he understood because he knew Jonathan's dad was special. He was the only adult he knew that played video games, but Albert had grown up thinking that only kids played video games. Albert began thinking about growing up and realized that growing up wasn't as serious as he thought. If Jonathan's dad could still be a dad and enjoy video games, then why couldn't Albert? So later that night, Albert snuck out of bed and into the garage. He picked up a cardboard box that was covered in dust, and after blowing it all off the top of the box, he opened it and pulled out a handheld video game that he used to play quite often before middle school. Leaving the box where it was, Albert takes the device and begins playing it as he walks back to his room, where he played it until he eventually fell asleep. That night, Albert dreamt of playing soccer with his classmates and scoring the winning goal the second before recess ends. He dreamt of eating lunch and spilling almost half his beans onto his white t-shirt and not even caring about the stain. After lunch, he goes to the class and sits next to Jonathan. Mr. Parker tells the students to find a partner, and Albert and Jonathan instantly exchange a glance with each other. He even dreamt of eating ice cream with Jonathan and his dad. Waking up the next morning, Albert was very disappointed that it was all a dream, for he remembered how happy he was. While eating breakfast, Albert hears a knock on the door. It was Jonathan's dad asking if Albert would like to walk to school with him and Jonathan. Feeling so overjoyed, Albert runs to his room to grab his backpack. But while in his room, he looks at his suit and his nice tie and his shiny black shoes and decides that today he will wear a white t-shirt and his cargo shorts, the ones with the holes in the sides from when he fell off his bike a year ago. Walking to school that day was Jonathan, his dad, and the happy new improved 12-year-old Albert who likes video games and has the most amazing friends in the world.